It's time for All Things Racing and Jesus with your hosts, Daniel Hillian and Mitch Reynolds.
That's right. Remain in the race. We are live here in our studio for episode 41. As always, across the table from me, the 137, Mitchell, the Rocket Reynolds. How you doing today, Mitchell?
What's up? I'm good, Super D. Ready for episode or part number 2 of an ATV Racing Life. Really excited to get Mr. Frank Batista of B&amp Racing Engines, a former Pro EDT racer, on here. I'm looking forward to it, man. It's going to be a good one, as always.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I didn't know about Frank was like he is B&B, and then after, kind of his racing career, he jumped into doing some motor work, and there are several guys in the Midwest series as well as the EDT series that run his heads and different setups and
He's
things.
been
for
linked
him.
up with a lot of our top EDT guys.
Yeah, for sure. So that'll
cool.
be exciting to get him on, and y'all had some good battles back in the day.
We did. Yes, definitely. I looked up to Frank for sure, but when we got on the track, like him and I diced it up for quite a 2 or 3 years there, like when I was in the height of my EDT pro days. Frank was as well, so it was a good time racing.
Yeah, man. And one of the things we were kind of joking about this, but Frank was just a cool dude. Like he just looked like a cool guy.
Yeah, my mom straight up embarrassed me one time in a riders meeting. So we had the national there, and Frank was there. And Mom's like getting us all together, and she's like, "Frank, I just want to tell you, my son, he really looks up to you. He likes your style. Like, he thinks you're a really cool dude." Mm-hmm. I'm like,
"Thanks, Mom.
Thanks." I'm like,
appreciate it, Mom.
a 17, 18-year-old boy here, like he's my competitor, Yeah, I mean, it's the truth. She was speaking the truth. Yeah. But still, like it was somewhat embarrassing in the riders meeting,
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Mom,
it's awkward, like a man crush or something, is the way she was painting it up,
Why did you have to do that, Mom?
But thank you.
Yeah, man. Well, that's it. It's gonna be fun to get him on, and one of the guys that's been at the top of the series that's close here to us is our man, Mr. Garrett Keister, and he's a big B&B guy.
He is, and we know that his motor rips. We've been on that, dude.
We have rode that
thing.
So
it is good. Hey, Super D, before we get too far,
hit me with it.
I want to circle back to our last, part 1 of an ATV Racing Life. If you haven't heard it, I encourage people to go back and listen to it.
Yeah, I've heard it.
You should have heard it. I mean, you were there. You participated. You've listened.
Yep.
I'm speaking specifically to the listener here.
Sure,
okay?
go ahead.
That's what I was talking about.
Yeah.
But a really, really cool story, getting to hear the backgrounds of Renegade Race Fuels. How a guy was, just kind of fed up with price gouging, and he said, "You know what? I'm going to be a renegade. I'm going to start my own company, my own race fuel company, so that we can produce a top quality fuel, but not kill these guys as far as the price market is concerned." And then, the fact that he started Renegade Reach and is part of that, so part of a charity that continues to pour back into the community of racers that might have fallen on hard times. Really cool, though, that he's used that and his faith journey and how God just kind of changed him and used him, the person and personality that he is, to really have a big impact on the motorsports industry.
Yeah, for sure.
So I just wanted to unpack that a little bit. Those are kind of my thoughts on that episode, and I really enjoyed being part of it, go back and listen to it, and I want to encourage others to go back and do that too.
Yeah, and speaking of which, he mentioned in there, he wanted to thank Ashley, and we do as well. She's been kind of our contact person through getting the interview set up and then afterwards, and she reached out today and just said, "Hey, I know y'all have another episode coming up, but Renegade has a new contingency program." And so we'll be posting on Facebook. You can go to renegadefuels.com/contingency. And it's pretty cool. Win any race, get rewarded. So yeah. Kind of a cool deal on there. And so you can get so much off if you want to buy it by the drum. I know a lot of guys, what we do, buy it by the pail. And so, you can do that. So make sure you hit them up. It was so good to have Toby on, and just a genuine guy, and he's going, okay, I know I can make fuel because I'm making it for these other dealers. Yeah. And they're charging out the wazoo. What if I just did it myself? And so cool. And to think that he was, it was either, start Renegade or It was a management at AutoZone.
Yeah, there you go. I was gonna say auto parts.
Auto part, So I mean, still involved with race stuff, which is cool. But yeah, I'm definitely glad Toby did what he did. So
me too, and the fact that we kind of got to be part of that story in some manner, just in sharing that story, really cool. Yeah. Speaking of sharing a story, you said we had some other info to share.
Yeah.
So hit me with it, Super D. Who do we got coming back this year?
Coming back to the pod.
Who are some new people that are going to partner with us?
Right off the top, yeah, always got to give some love to Miss Debbie Bartosik. 88 Live to Ride, such an incredible foundation. What she's done over the last 20 years, the way she's impacted the motocross world specifically, but all of ATV racing, and she's just a dear friend. We love Miss Debbie. Super close to your family. I feel like I sat and visited her with her at Budds Creek for an hour. It was great.
She's basically a second mom to me, for sure.
So good.
Many other racers on top of that.
Yes, absolutely, yeah. And JB's cooler on the other side of a pill. Like, he never gets wound up about nothing. And so excited to have 88 Live to Ride back on board with us. RJR, Ryland Johnson Racing, actually got a little cross-country build going in the garage as we speak. You were texting me the other day, and you were like, hey, what about blah, blah, blah motor? I'll dangle that carrot. And I said, I actually have blah, blah, blah motor in my garage right now. And you were like, So, well, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I may be moving in my cross-country world to a fuel-injected machine, maybe. I don't know. We'll see.
If you were smart, you would.
Okay, yeah.
I know you're smart.
It's definitely fuel-injected. So I'm excited to get that thing going. New to the pod, you've heard his name on here. He's a part of, kind of what we do. But that is Mr. Kevin Allen Cleveland of Terrain Motorsports, ATM, has jumped on board with us, partnering up with us this year. And so I know there's a lot of local guys here, close to us in Central Arkansas that, reach out to Kevin Allen for parts and different things. And so we want to make sure we give him the credits that's due. And also, him and Ryland together, like, they both have their own separate businesses. But together they have Bullet. Yeah. So that's what my cross-country machine will be, a Bullet machine.
Hey, and you sent me a sweet picture of a black bin with a white bar pad.
Yeah.
We have something else,
Also new to the pod this year is Phoenix Handlebars. We're actually got an interview coming up with some pro quad racers that run Phoenix Handlebars, and it was just crazy. Reached out to Jason of Phoenix Handlebars and just said, hey, I feel like you're kind of like Renegade, a smaller, it's not like Renthal or Pro Taper, but a smaller handlebar company really trying to get their foot in the door with
good quality.
Good quality stuff. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So I'm rocking the hoodie right now, man. So that's what my new build will have, Phoenix Handlebars on it.
Hey, and on top of that, we've got a benefit to our listeners.
Yeah.
So got a code there.
Yeah.
RITR15.
RITR15 at phoenixhandlebars.com. You can get those off. It's a super simple way to figure out your bar bin. And I know, like, at first I just ran whatever bar. Like, I saw a post, our fellow podcaster Cody Jansen had a picture of Keith Little. Did you see this the other day of him running those?
And he's like, put the TT bin, and I'm like, no, that was his TT bin.
Yeah, it was like that quad racer bend. And I remember
we've discussed handlebars here, like how you've riding the machine versus the machine riding you.
Yeah.
Definitely. Keith was the person I looked up to the most.
Oh,
it's like
absolutely.
I wanted to do what Keith did and went to every riding school and so on and so forth.
Yep.
It was the one thing that I could not buy into. The handlebars.
See, and that way,
everything else,
I didn't
the
know
feel
any better.
of his chassis, everything, I would get on that and I'd be like, no, dude, my wrist, my elbows are tucked in. Can't do this. This would be the number one thing. Like when I rode his quad, that was like the one thing I'm like, I just can't even go fast yet because of these handlebars.
Well, even, through the podcast and talking about this, we had a guy that's kind of the same boat. Like, hey, I've always ran this style of handlebar. And, we were just talking and visiting, and they switched it up, and we're like, I feel like I'm riding better. And it's like, well, the lap times and your results agree, So anyways, Phoenix Handlebars has a super user-friendly website. It's not a bunch of bar bends that it's, kind of crazy. Like their 118, that's a fat bar, big fat bar clamp. And then they have a 78, that's the 7/8 bar. And then there's a few different bends in that, and they've got it marked. Like if you want to shorten them,
user friendly,
super
discount.
Super. Yep.
I mean,
user
all
friendly
the good things.
Yep. And then I forgot to mention, sorry, AJ, but 110% nutrition. They're gonna jump back in as well. And so Mitch is drinking out of the cup right now. So thanks, right, AJ, for that. And so we've got our Builders Brawl guys. We're waiting to hear back from one. Okay. But we've got those locked in. We've got some dates lined up that Mitchell and I will for sure be there the whole time, the whole race, the whole shebang. There may be a few others that we're able to jump in, a little bit here and there.
I hope. Lock into the ones though. We'll be ready.
Yeah, so that's exciting too. So we teased a few things in the last episode, but we got a lot of good stuff coming down the line, and it's going to be good. So big shout out to all of our partners and all of our sponsors for allowing us to do what we love to do, man.
Absolutely.
Oh, speaking of which, I just looked across the table there, and I got to give a big shout out to Little Man Syrup. So at the banquet here a few weeks ago, man, I was just bragging on Little Man Syrup. Like every time it'd come up, like I think for dinner we had chicken and like a nice dinner, and I was like, what would make this better? Little Man Syrup, and so that's what Jay sent me a text that, hey man, what's your address? And so he sent actually Miss Jessica sent you and I some syrup.
I tagged Jason on Instagram, but Miss Jessica, we knew who it came from.
Oh yeah,
Jason's name was just the first one I could tag.
Right.
But I'm super excited to tap into this bottle right now.
Yeah. Oh, it's good. I love what you did there. Well, hey, tell you what, we've got the number 13 of Frank Batista on the line. So y'all stay with us real quick. We're gonna hit a little break, and we'll be back with Frank Batista. Stay with us.
I want to welcome in a good friend of mine, a former EDT pro racer, owner of B&B Racing Engines, the former number 13 of Frank Batista. How are you, my man?
I'm doing good, brother. How about yourself?
I'm doing well, man. It's good to hear your voice. I know it's been a little while, probably back to when we were racing each other since the last time you and I have really talked. I know we've texted here, but just actually had a face-to-face conversation or anything like that. It's been a minute.
I think it's been 2008, 7?
Yeah, probably 2000.
No, 9. Maybe 2009. What was your last year? 9 on this?
Yeah,
because Suzuki, right?
In 9, I was on the Polaris in MX.
On the Polaris.
But in 08, I was doing the TT thing. But that, the end of my TT racing was when I hit the guardrail down there at Pine Lake. Technically from where we're at, and that was when I was like, well, I'm just going to switch my focus to motocross, which we know how that all ended. But anyway,
it's all good.
Good times anyway. So Frank, tell the Remain in the Race crew or squad or listeners about yourself. Like, who is Frank Batista?
I'm just a crazy guy from the West Coast that tried making his name be known on the East Coast with all the big time racers. I actually got into racing out of a customer. My dad's kind of forced me into riding his 250R. And this was like in 2002. Basically, my family, my dad and mom raced micro sprints. My mom's a 9-time national champion in micro sprints. My dad built race engines all through the micro sprint stuff. And so that's kind of where I got involved in as far as racing. And then when I was born, my mom and dad was I lived at racetracks. That's, from micro tracks to sprint car tracks or you name it, we were there as a family. So we were heavily involved. So that's kind of where we started and where I started into the racing scene.
So that's back the early 2000s. I mean, you're the West Coast guy. I always looked up to you as the super cool guy, the guy with all the style and swagger. And then you could put it on the racetrack, of course, as well. Me and you, we kind of diced it out there for a couple years for sure. But what brought you kind of east? What brought you over to the EDT racing world?
Well, it's crazy. You see, on my side over here, we don't have Class C traction stuff. We have one track. It's about 2.5 hours south of me. It's called Lodi. I mean, it's probably one of the fastest, smoothest TT tracks that I've ever raced in my life. I mean, super speed, big speeds. So I didn't run a lot of Class C traction. It was all cushion TTs. So we ran knobbies every once in a while we throw on some tri-tracks, and at that time they had that old 0 compound tri-track, which was like a gumball.
Okay. Right.
They were awesome, but they didn't last for nothing, but they would work. But so I raced here locally. Me, actually, Robert McClure, you met Robert. Robert raced back east as well. Robert and I started our first day racing quads together. We was at the same track, about 45 minutes here in Chowchilla. We were, at that time there's only A class and Pro-Am stuff around here. So we ran the little Pro-Am class, and me and Robert diced it up pretty hard, and we kind of started beating all the pros, and they pushed us up in class quick. I got approached, was it middle of 04 from a local guy named Sean Patterson. Sean's a really good guy, really tight with Curtis Sparks. And, Curtis was tight with my mom because Curtis actually sponsored my mom in her micro sprints.
Okay, cool.
It was kind of how I know Curtis. And my mom met Shane actually in the 80s when she was racing for Curtis as well. So that's kind of how I met Shane Hit. But anyways, Sean approached me and said, "Hey, would you mind riding my Honda?" And I was on Yamahas. A local dealer gave me 2 brand new 04s at that time. I was running them stock. I ran the stadium stuff that came to Anaheim and Arizona. I ran both those races on that new Yamaha.
So correct me if I'm wrong. Was that like the Mickey Thompson series?
Yeah, it was awesome, man. It was so much fun. It was a little bit of jumping, nothing crazy, but they had little rhythm sections. But it was during the Monster Jam. It was really fun. Like we had a really good time doing that. And I think I got 5th in Anaheim. And then I went to Arizona and bent to stem. Didn't do very well. I didn't even make the main event in Arizona. I had a little get off on that one. But anyways, Sean Patterson approached me to ride his Honda at a track in Bakersfield and said, "Hey, Curtis built this for me." He's like, "You mind riding it? I know you don't ride Hondas, but you want to try it out." And I honestly didn't like Hondas. They felt small and short to me compared to my Yamaha. My Yamaha felt like an R. And that was how my feel. I love the Yamaha feel because it felt like it's 250R to me. Yeah. But the Honda just felt like a real short bike, and I got on his bike. The bike was fast. It was fun to ride, but it wasn't set up correctly for me in instance. But I rode it for a couple races, did really well. And he said, "Hey, let's go to Tulsa. You ever raced Tulsa before?" I said, I've never even been in an airplane before." so he said, "I'm going to fly you out to Tulsa." I said, "Shoot, I thought like a rock star. This is cool. I've never been in an airplane."
Was that for the shootout?
Yeah, for the shootout. It was in 04 was the first year I ran it. Mm-hmm. And I tell you what, it was really cool. I mean, I never ran, that kind of TT stuff and that kind of traction stuff. And obviously at that time, Baker was there killing everybody still. And Baker was a hard guy to beat. And I think I got a heat race with Baker. And I had a quick understanding of how fast Tulsa changes for traction that year. So bike was bicycling in the heat race and then smoking tires off the main like on ice skates, so it was cool. It was a good experience. I don't remember how I got that first. I think I got like 8th or something. And then he said, "Hey man," he goes, you think you want to give it a try at the national stuff next year?" And I was like, "Yeah." I mean, I couldn't really afford it, but I'm like, "Yeah, I'm all game for it." But obviously I had to drive out. So I think 06 was the first year I actually tried that stuff. Okay. And we went out and started in Brashear, and I think Brashear I was running pretty decent. I blew a tire off the bead. There's a video that someone keeps interluding on Facebook, and it shows me sitting in silence talking to Robert after I blew the tire off. But I think I was running mid pack or something, and I wasn't going to hang on. That track would beat it. It was that was that rain race that killed you.
Oh man, it was brutal. That was brutal.
I wasn't even a motocrosser, and I thought I was dying on that one. I was just like, and I only won 8 laps, and I blew the tire off the bead, and I watched the rest of the race, but I had a great time. I mean, if it wasn't for Sean, I probably never would have went back east. I just couldn't afford it at that time. I was just getting out of college, and
let's kind of go there for a little bit, Frank, just to kind of give some people some insight. So motorsports is an expensive thing. I mean, it is expensive for everyone. But when you factor in the fact that you're having to travel all the way from California, and most of these events are towards the East Coast, really. So you're having to travel across the country just for these weekend events for, I can't remember what the series was back in that point in time, maybe 8, 9, 10 rounds, maybe.
I think it was 10 rounds. Yeah. Cause I just, the last race I myself drove to was Ohio, and it was 46 hours, man.
Good grief. Well, so Daniel was asking me, and I was like, I can't remember like if Frank stayed over here some.
I hope.
I was like,
Well-
man, that would be a long
well,
trip.
Well, that's so Ohio's last race, and then Daryl Rath was the very first person to ever, give me some, as far as sponsorship. Like he came up to me and said, "Hey, man, would you mind running my bumpers?" And and I put a front bumper on it, and then he offered to haul my bike for the last 3 or 4 rounds because it was just beat me up, man. That race there, I think that's kind of like my breakout that year. I did pretty darn good. I think I won a heat race for the first time, and I think I ran 5th or 6th in the main. I think that year. Ohio is a track like I'm used to, big around here. The whole tracks were big like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right,
That was when that was when the bowl turn was there. That was a fun track, So it was wide open, and throw your grenades over your shoulder and let's go kind of thing. And I kind of like that kind of track. And that was the last race that I physically drove to. But my little brother Dustin, I drove that one. It was death driving back home after that.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're talking, okay, so you're driving a minimum of 3 days. So travel there and travel back, maybe even 4 days. To
And
no
mechanic, no mechanic, two classes, and it was hard, man. I physicality wise, I could run the speed with the guys that were at that time was Keith, Shane, Timmy, all those guys, but I just couldn't hang on that long. And it's more breathing and riding style. You know me. I mean, me and you rode similar a lot. We're wild.
Yeah, this is true. Yeah.
You know what I mean? All over the bike. And that's what was always Shane was like, you're riding too hard on the bike. You just need to slow down, and it was that. Yeah, you just get used to the rhythm, So and that was the part of it. And I could be fast enough. I couldn't have the longevity with it. So I was good for like 12, and then I had to back it down. And you can't back it down with guys like Timmy and Shane. Those guys, they just turn it up.
They just keep hammering.
I mean, if that's the way that you figured out how to go fast, it's really hard to say, okay, now kind of sit on the seat and don't move much. Like it's almost impossible to retrain your mind of that if that's the way you've learned to go fast at the beginning. So yeah, you and I did have similar styles.
Exactly.
Just a little bit, Frankie. Well, what I'm hearing at the beginning is, many people, this is how they get into racing. Their family were racers before in some form of racing, and then someone introduces them to a new part of the racing and invites them to more. And then next thing you know, this is our level of commitment. We're driving 2 days, race an event, don't sleep at the event hardly, race our tail off, and then drive home, work, and then get ready to repeat. I mean, this is a story of so many racers across the country. It's like once it's in our blood, we can't get it out, and we're going to do anything. So, Frank, tell 100%. Me, before we get much farther into your racing career, we know you had pro wins. You were very competitive in the series, and you made your ascension really quick. I mean, if you started racing in 06 and then you're over here, in 02 and then you're over here in 06, like that's that 4 or 5 years was the height of your career in the EDT racing world. So it's just like you were immediately at the top. And that was cool.
I was definitely fortunate, that I fit in that well that quick.
So I'm just hearing your motivation at that point was just the competition, being able to compete, being able to go out there and do the thing. But your life's a little different now, being an engine builder, and I want you to take us into how that developed. But what's the big motivation, or can you think of the motivation that keeps you being part of this community, this racing community that you started in over 20 years ago as an enthusiast, as a racer, and now as a person who is an engine builder and provides a lot of horsepower for individuals to participate in it?
Yeah, I think that it's just the passion. It was never about the money or exposure. I had the passion, and then my long-term good friends have all, to this day, my best friends are all coming from racing from back east. I still talk to, I talk to Shane a lot, Scott Butler a lot. A lot of people, Jeff Sin. I remember training with Daryl at his dad's house there in Florida, and me and Jeff are really good buddies. I built his engines now, and it's just, I love the sport and I love giving back to it. I was that kid chasing a dream, just trying to get it. I didn't go back there to lose, and that was it. Otherwise I'd stay around my local area and just beat everybody up and be a cool guy, but I wanted to race against the best people in the world, and I got that opportunity, and it was a dream come true. I mean, I got to beat Harold and Shane. I was like I thought that was I remember vaguely that Ohio race, or the race in Arizona or Ava, Missouri with you.
Yeah. Man,
I was actually crying in my helmet that last lap. It was like the coolest experience ever, man. It was cool because that was something I wanted to get it. That was like a goal. I didn't want to run a pro-am race. I want to run a pro race because most guys. Most guys
at the height of it, you wanted to win the Super Bowl. Like, I want to win a pro race, and you did it. And it's just like that moment of like, this is what I've been working towards. Like, it is amazing feeling. You can't describe it, really.
Oh, you can't. And it was one of those feelings. I mean, and the bad part is I can give you a hindsight of that night. The day before, Curtis Sparks and I roomed together that night before, and I had the biggest migraine. I was puking my brains out all night long. I was actually lay in the cold shower. I didn't sleep for nothing the night before. I had something going on. I mean, and I didn't even think I'd be able to like physically blast a race because Curtis, everybody knows Curtis. Curtis is a snorer, so you can't sleep with him very good sometimes. and so I just didn't sleep. I had a bad night, and it ended up being the best night of my life racing, and it was a surreal experience, just what I'd worked my tail off and the countless hours of driving and just, I mean, I dumped all my money into racing, and just to get yourself out there and be exposed. And it was, still rewarding. So I think that's the reason why my dad's always built engines. So the B&B racing thing started when I was a little kid. My dad did a lot of local stuff. My brothers also, they all raced too. But my dad was big in the micro sprints and that kind of area. So that's kind of where all the motor engine stuff. So I grew up wrenching on bikes. I didn't get my first quad until 2002. I got a J-arm Banshee. That's what my first race quad was. You know what I mean? And it was the coolest thing. I had an old J-arm with some old rolls on arms off of a customer's bike that he got rid of, and I cut down a shortened swing arm and made my own swing arm out of it. And it was a eBay bike, at that time of life, and used parts, and I beat that thing up. I won a lot of races around local. I won a lot of money around here on that darn thing, but that's kind of, I have a soft heart for the guys who need the help like that. So I'm giving back. I feel that I got so much out of the sport. Friends, long-term, lifetime friends like Shane Hidden and Daryl and Tim Farr and Keith. I feel it's just morally correct and ethically correct to give back to the people who need it too. That's the reason why that's the reason I do it, and that's, Aaron, the Medlins, I've been doing Aaron's work since 2011, I believe.
What great people. Love those people.
And great kids, and like the Coltrane's. I mean, I remember, little Daniel and his brother, Godspeed him, but I trained those kids with Brad's house, and when the little kids, and it's cool to see those kids that were little babies when we were racing. They're all pro riders now, and that's just, to me, that's rewarding, and if I can help a kid like that or a family in need, that's more. It's not the money. It's not about the money. Because if it's about the money, I wouldn't be doing build motors. We all know that it's not how it works.
You definitely wouldn't be racing, that's for sure.
No, not at all.
It's come full circle. Like, you're just kind of emulating what it is to be an individual in the sport of racing. So, it's the passion or the drive to win, to compete, that gets you in the sport. Then it's the connection, the people, the community that keeps you there. Like, you're like, I just love the connections I have with my best friends from different states. They live across the country from me, yet we're like best of friends because we have this connection through racing, and that's kind of what keeps that passion alive and driving forward of, well, this sport has given me so many connections and friendships and community that I want to continue to be part of it and continue to pour back in. So I want other people to receive the things that I've been given. So, I mean, that's kind of the heart of the ATV racing community right there. That story can repeat itself in different forms. And dude, I mean, I just love being a part of it. That's
me too.
Obviously, what Daniel and I do is a little bit different. I mean, what we're producing is different than what you're producing. You're producing them equipment to go out there and perform and do their thing. And this is your business. This is your livelihood. Daniel and I are just trying to shed light on this sport in itself. Like give some exposure to this sport as we can. And it's all because of that same thing. Like we love the connection of people that we have made through this sport, and that's what motivates us as well.
Yeah, I mean that's it's crazy. I just the racing community is so tight knit, and a lot of people from the outside looking in don't really understand that, unless they've been involved with it, and what any kind of form of racing. So it's just kind of that's how I it's just a different kind of friendship, and I can't stress that to anybody that's involved in that. I mean, there are people I remember Brad Covington. Remember Brad? I know you know.
Oh
Brad
yeah. He was our local man.
That guy was a rocket back in the day. And I remember, I lent him 5 gallons of gas for his little. He had the rider truck.
Little yellow moving truck. Yeah, sure enough.
Yeah, he didn't have enough gas money to get home. I mean, that's how dedicated he was to that sport. He was he was racing for gas money to get home, and he was a local guy. And I'm thinking 32 hours, whatever it was, to Arkansas, and this guy's can't go 30 minutes. And I was spending my last dimes and maxing credit cards out on gas to get there. So I was just like, man, it comes from the passion, and it's like a different kind of drug, or whatever you'd say. It's an addiction that. It's cool. There's no feeling like it does when it comes down to being a competitor, if that makes any sense. If you don't have the competitive in you shouldn't be racing anyways. But
that's for sure.
That's what it comes down to. If you're competitive, I mean, if you're out there for recreational means, you shouldn't be racing.
So
that's just
Frank, I like to think I'm not a competitive person, and so when we started this podcast,
which is not true, but keep
going. I'm kidding. So we started this podcast, and at first it was like, let's just talk about racing. And then it was like, well, let's go to a few. And then lo and behold, I now have multiple machines in my garage, Mitch's boilers in his garage. So anyways, we go racing, and I go out in the first time I've been back on a, flat track, really competitively in 15, 20 years. I don't know, a long time. And went out A class, and I got a bad start and killed it one time or something. Anyway, I think I got 5th, and I'm sitting at back of the truck, and Mitch comes over there, and he's just laughing, and he thinks it's hilarious. And he said, we're just coming to have fun, right? And I was like, and then, but then I tell you what, the next race, we got on top of the box. I got my ducks. But it's just one of those things. Like I love everything about it. I love the people we've gotten to meet. Before we hit record, we talked about a couple of the guys you sponsor. Garrett, Tevis Witt. Those guys, and the Medlins. Last time we was at Pine Lake, we were pulling out to drive home, and Aaron is running down the road, and I said, "Hey man, what's up?" He said, "I just wanted to tell you bye. Hope y'all be careful going home. See ya." And I'm
they're such a good family.
You're a pro racer, man. I'm just a goofy guy with Mitch that doesn't, but and it's just, like you say, it's just a bond that,
it is.
It's just
it's
weird and goofy,
awesome.
But more people need to be a part of it. It's great.
I remember the same groups going when I come to our track. It was always Mrs. Pritchard and Mr. Pritchard. They were always there early, or Chucky.
Yeah.
And they're just the most nicest. I mean, I loved him. He would come up and give me so much crap or whatever. Call me a pretty boy Mexican or something. He'd always, he'd always give me some kind of crap. But he was the nicest man in the world. And it was like an acceptance, thing. 'Cause I was an outsider. I mean, I ain't
You're
that
from California, Frank. Good grief, man.
they all think I'm in beaches where I'm at, but I'm actually in farmland. You know, that's the bad part. I'm right in dairy country, so there's no. I mean, beaches aren't too far away, like a couple
Right.
hours, but I'm in farmland. You know, so that's kind of the fun
I think
thing for
everyone,
that
when they
stuff.
envision California that's not from California, they think you're the beach guy. You
Yeah,
know, you're
surfer boy.
your Cal, you're surfer boy. You know, but you did
No,
have
there's
stuff going on. That's all I remember.
Well,
What?
it's just cool how, being part of, you're like, oh, I'm just going to go race, and I think that's kind of what got, Mitch's family, my family hooked was it's more than just a race, I mean, it's like, Mitch always rode mods and I rode a blaster or something for a little bit. And it's one of those deals like you want to go like there, it's always your buddies and you want to go have fun, but it's like, I'm going to beat you.
Yes.
That's and then when the race is over, you talk about it, you shake hands, you're friends, but then the next race you're like, yeah, I'm definitely beating you this time. It's a weird thing, but oh dude, it's so cool just to hear your story and 40 something hours. It's
crazy.
So speaking of that, and you said, Daryl was like, hey man, I'll get your bike to the next couple of races. Well, when we were at Bud's Creek last year, I'd met Tevin the year before and kind of got to visit with him a little bit. And so we were sitting there and of course he's got both his arms in cast and he's just like, hey man. And I said, what's up? He goes, so you and Mitch literally jump on an airplane, fly here, get to ride all these awesome four-wheelers, and then you just fly home? And I said, yep. And he's like, man, I should have started a podcast, And I said, well, that's just kind of how it worked out. But yeah, I'm sure that was a huge relief knowing, hey, I don't have to drive to these things. Daryl will get my stuff there. I just jump on a plane, man.
I think I contribute my 07 year. I had a good year that year. I had a really good year that year. The rain out in DeCoin kind of messed me up a little bit for points, but I had a good year that year, and I contribute 100% to Michelle Hetrick and Rich. I had a truck. I always worked on my own bikes. I was my own mechanic. I don't like anybody touching my stuff because I'm just picky. But having Rich take care of my bike that 07 year and me just flying out and just worry about racing the bike took the stress out. And I could concentrate on racing rather than concentrate like, oh man, I got to cut another set of tires and I got to change a motor. I got to do this. And then I got to race, So it was, they were the reason why I succeeded that year, and 100% I owe it to them. They're amazing people for that. I mean, Curtis still was building my motors that year. Kurt and I had a really good relationship with certain things, and he took care of me. Even though he knew my dad built motors too, but he took care of me and gave me some cool stuff, and I did a lot of the crazy testing stuff for him. And a lot of times, because Shane was racing his bikes too, his motors too, and I mean, Shane knew I had more power a lot of times, but Shane he just would flat out tell the announcer he could outride me, and he was right. That's what it came down to. And then it was kind of one of those deals. I think it was Elizabeth City, North Carolina. It was right after Ava. I won Ava, go to Elizabeth City, and I led that race, 17 laps, and that sucker passed me. And I had more horsepower than him, and I knew it, but he just was smarter. And I think you got third that race, or fourth.
Mitch.
I think you got right behind Chucky. Got third, you got fourth. I think it was like
I knew I found myself right around you quite a few races that year. Like, it would be
Suzuki.
Yep, on the Suzuki, the very light Suzuki. Yep, I think it's light.
Oh man, they did so much work to that thing. Like
that was a bad bike.
And really didn't even
swing arm was 10 inches long.
It was.
Yeah, it was tiny.
I know it was tiny. I don't know.
Yeah.
It was like they were constantly, man, there were like 4 people involved on that machine, and they were constantly doing something. I just literally got on the thing and went. And we really didn't figure out the gearing part of it, the gearing ratio till the end. Like I think we were at Greenville, Tennessee or somewhere, and we were figuring out the whole year we were running the wrong gear ratio. And because the motor just finally came alive at that track, which is really, really long. I don't know if you remember it, but it was like, man, if we could have stuck it out with that machine was sick. And
dude, that was a beautiful bike. I remember that.
I don't think I realized at that time like how the magnitude of that, like being basically a factory ride at that point in time. You know, I was
Yep.
just showing up and racing basically, but you know, just all the hands that were in that, Kevin Mumaw and Jody and Henson
Oh yeah.
had his way on that, and who else? Wayne was in on it on the suspension part. Like minds, like out of this world minds, were all collaborating to put a machine together. So
Yeah, you definitely have one of the nicest Suzuki I ever saw. I mean, that was a beautiful, a beautiful bike. I just, because
it
that,
wasn't
because that
it
07
wasn't
year was
my
good.
doing. It was just I got the ability to ride the machine. It was just the collaboration of like some really, really awesome people working so hard. So now that I kind of mentioned, it's like that bike should have just won. Maybe they needed someone else
Yeah.
riding it. I don't know. But anyway,
Well, that was like me. That was
was
like me that year too. That's a collaboration for myself too. I mean, Scott Butler. I mean, I basically got Keith's TT program that year from Lone Star,
Mhm.
which was really cool, and that was kind of a neat thing for me. I never expected stuff like that, but and I did a lot of testing for Elka that year, because Elkas weren't really big, at all. And I was running the no link on the bike with that custom Elka on there, and it was a whole different ball game. I mean, that bike was a light bike too. I think that was one of my lightest bikes I've had, and it was like 325, 321.
wow.
And it was with a stock tank. It didn't even have a small tank on it.
I
It
remember
was.
actually like Keith was the one. Well, I don't know
Oh,
if
I
it
think it
was
was
Keith,
light.
but that would just build those machines, and then you would actually even start having to add weight. Like Dad was going over and helping him zip tie stuff to the front of his machine because it was too light just to distribute weight. I mean, it
Well,
was
see
like
that was that year in Arkansas. I actually added. My bike was 307 coming into Arkansas that year, and I couldn't ride the bike. It was like a bucking bull. It was just like it was too
like
much power. The weight distribution wasn't right, so I actually ended up putting the front bumper. We poured lead in it,
yeah, yeah,
um, and then the rear bumper same way, and then I put some of my foot pegs
yeah.
to kind
That's
of distribute the
I
weight a
remember.
little better. And I get that 320 ratio was a lot better
Definitely
for
remember.
me as a
What
bike.
was the threshold of too light to make the chassis work just right?
Yeah.
Man,
Well,
what?
it's like a nimble bike, so but
It is
yeah.
funny just to hear about all the little things that people are doing. And as an amateur, there's a lot of times you're like, yeah, I've got air in my tires, and you just kind of roll on. And then the more you get into the sport, the more you realize, hey, if you'll move the links on this sway bar, it does stuff. Hey, if you'll adjust, your ride height, it helps. It's just I love just nerding out, knowing what I know now to looking back when we first started. It's like, yeah, we had wrong compound tires. Like we'd have like a soft on the left and a super hard on the right. Like we didn't,
Hey,
and
I had the same combo of my American racers every single main event for Ashtabula, Ohio. I ran a 28 right rear and a 23 left rear and 23 fronts. I ran that same main event tire, same gear ratio, and it always worked. It always worked for me. It just
That's
was
had
one of
it
those
figured
things. But
out.
it
but
is
when I get off the
funny
main event, that right tire would be smoked off, right front tire would be smoked off, but that bike always would ride itself. I can almost never lift it in the straightaway and just keep going. It was fun.
Oh, that's awesome.
Oh man, I'm here for it. I love it, man. So, with all your racing and stuff you did, so after let's kind of jump in. I know I told you Mitch was driving, but I'm curious now. So you raced TT. So after when did you kind of move out of the flat track world into the 4x4 world? Because there was a
Oh,
stint where you were
yep.
into that, right? Yeah.
On the polar bear. Yep, on the Polaris. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was 2000, I think it's 2009. Yeah,
Nine,
2009.
yeah. That would have been the
Yep.
Team Polaris year.
Yep, team Polaris here. Daryl and I ran the eight, at that time, the beginning of the year was the 800 Sportsman. That it was definitely changed over, not from a stock one. And then we progressed in the 850. But I tell you, the first GNCC race I raced, one of those things, I was laughing half the time in my helmet during the race because it was the funnest thing I ever did in my life was GNC racing. It was so cool. I'm like, this is racing. This is like a Sunday cruise to me. Like it was like a blast. But you're on a full drive, and we
Yeah,
beat
yeah.
the living tar out of those things, and it was it was frustrating a little bit because it's just like you knew you could ride the bike hard, but you didn't want to break the bike. So that was my problem, is I just rode too hard, and I would break the machine. I'd break fuel pumps or break shocks or something. I was a little too aggressive when it came down to bashing out in the woods. So
So
I
GNCC
built the
racing, I mean,
yeah,
I've never done
it
it.
was a
You've only been the 12-hour races, but what I'm hearing is management of mind and machine. So like
oh yeah,
the sprint
yeah.
racer in us, the EDT racer just is like push, 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 push,
Yep.
and you can't do that cross country.
No, you can't, boy. You want to, but then all of a sudden you're coming down a hill about 500 miles an hour, and you got to turn right on a quad. They don't work out so well sometimes.
Well, and
I
that's the
spent
thing.
I
That's
took
the
I took
thing
a lot of
too.
trees out. I took a lot of trees out. I can tell you that much. I
Oh
wouldn't.
yeah. Well, that
I was
four-wheeler
bad.
weighs
I was I
900
was
pounds.
Oh yeah, I was bad about that.
Well, I know when we first started cross country, it was like, just go as hard as you can for as long as you can. And then it's like, then we heard the word rhythm, like get into a rhythm. Oh, okay. And then, that last lap, whatever you have left, then give it all
You
you've
kick it
got.
up.
You've
Yep.
kind of got the track figured out and whatnot. But it's so funny, Frank, because, I'm not 18 anymore. Actually have a birthday next week, so watch out, plus 35 class. I'm coming for you. But the last few, cross countries we did, Dad and I, we'd be, standing there afterwards talking, and he said, "Well, how do you think you did?" And I said, "My third lap was the fastest." He said, "Really?" I said, "Oh yeah, I guarantee it. In the last 3 races I've done, my third lap was the fastest." Like, okay, well, I got into the rhythm. I just couldn't sustain it, and it's just, learning about it and figuring out all the things that makes it work, man.
I was in the best shape ever as far as riding shape ever that cross country year, because
Well, yeah, you
I
were
noticed.
fighting a grizzly bear for 2 hours.
Oh, I know it was a blast, but I never I raced that year. That's when I won the state line supermoto race that year, and I'd always would peter out on around the 20 laps in that state line race. I'd get a little tired on asphalt. It's a little different G force going on compared to TT stuff. Then they had a good motocross section. Well, the year before I just got tired. When Nick beat me, I was tired. It was my fault because I hadn't ran that kind of style of racing. But that last year I ran, my own dad comes up to me. He's like, "Well, I can tell you're in better riding shape." And he's like, "Your last 3 laps are almost 2 to 3 seconds faster." I knew I had to turn it up, and I actually had the ability to, and it
Yeah.
came from the cross country stuff. Just
Mhm.
the training I did for that was way different. I would
So
set
Thank
clocks
you.
on my watch, and
Oh,
yep, it was a
time
good
out,
time.
time
You
out.
just uncorked something that Mitch and I we go back and forth. So our roots are flat track. Your roots are flat track too, Frank. But Mitch
Yes, sir.
also dabbled in the motocross world. Well, I have a brain and I want to go to work on Monday, so I'm not jumping. That's not my jam. But I'll get in the woods and go between the trees till the cows come home. And so we're always going back and forth. And there's a lot of the top tier guys in, the flat track world that are also cross trained doing motocross or cross country. I keep trying to push people into the woods. I'm
And
like,
I keep
It, it,
pushing them to motocross.
yes,
Yeah, in motocross, I wasn't real good. I was okay, but I was at best a good B rider. Oh, I think I ran the B or A class one year on the Polar Bear. I don't know.
We
I
have
think I
come
think it
to
was
the
A.
So while we
I
have a
think
banter back and forth of who's in the cross country world, who's in the motocross world, the consensus we have is, and you said it, cross training will make you stronger and better
100%.
in an EDT race. So that's where we
Any
can
day,
reach
any
the
day of the week.
consensus
If a
for
guy
sure.
if a guy wants to get in longevity, my best riding shape was that cross country year, and then I came back in the TT racing the following year. And the only reason I came back in was because of Charles McKibben. I
Yeah.
wouldn't. I probably would have been done in 2009. My mom had been real sick, and I had a job, and man, it was getting a little bit harder on money because that contingency money and all the other money was kind of going away a lot. So I was strapped out kind of a little bit too much, and if it wouldn't have been for Mr. McKibben, I wouldn't have had that last year. The last 2 years, whatever, TT racing, and that would have been done.
But aren't you thankful that people like that step up and help you out? They see
It,
a need and they feel it.
I was going broke. I had
Well,
no
yeah,
money.
that's also part of it.
I mean, while we all come to those crossroad of like figuring out, well, okay, it's time to move a different direction in life. It is also cool that we get the opportunity to still be involved in the ATV racing community and have the opportunity to pay it forward, just like Charles did with you. Like
Charles,
you to
I mean,
sustain your career, keep
he was
working.
amazing. I
Yeah.
think I rode is because Casey had one of Timmy's old bikes.
Yeah.
And there's no five.
That's
And
right.
he goes, we're going to go to Ohio. You want to race this bike? And I said, sure. And like, whatever. And I hadn't even practiced the bike or nothing. All I brought was my handlebars because I had a certain handlebar I liked, and the stem I always like the stock plus one forward stems. I don't like anything taller than that. It was
it's funny how this is going back to conversations we were having prior to recording
I
here.
ran the same set of bars, man.
What handlebars did you run? Like what did you like?
The tag TRX 450R bar. It had to be that brand because the sweep was a little bit more than normal. The height was about like what Keith had more pullback than those. Yeah, but Keith's the one that got me on those bars. They're on one of those practice bikes, and I loved them.
You're gonna love the first part of this pod where we're talking about handlebar. We actually have a sponsorship from Phoenix Handlebars. Anyways, the point is, we were making fun of Keith in those quad racer Renthal super sweep elbow
comfy
handlebars.
Yeah, it's like riding a Harley.
Yeah, like we can't do it. We cannot. We've got to have those flatter, straight bars to get elbows up. It's just it's funny.
That's it. But so Charles had me ride that bike, and I had rode it, and it didn't have the power I was used to as far as the other bike, the last bike I'd ran. So I ran it there in Ohio, and I think I got third. I got the podium. I think I finished up behind Harold or something on that 05, and I was jazzed, man. I was like, I may have won the program that weekend, but got third in the pro. It was one of the two, I don't remember. But so we got back, and that was like the last two races of the year or whatever. And he called me over there and said, "Hey man, would you like to race with Casey and I?" And Casey and I got along really well. He's like a little brother to me, and we still talk weekly and to this day, and
too cool. Another racing connection.
We built race bikes, and so he still had he had Timmy's old tie bike. That bike was bad, light, top of the line, everything is tie, beautiful bike.
Definitely.
So I built a new 07 bike. We sold that 05, and I bought a new 07. And then I was gonna, Curtis was gonna do it again, but Kurt he had some stuff going on in life, and it was like 2 weeks before the first GT race, and I was like, I need a motor. I got to build my own real quick or something. I was waiting, and he didn't get back to me. So Dan Laney contacted me, and he didn't have a TT racer because Keith tried 1 year a little bit, but that was his going out year. He really didn't get to race that bike that Dan built for him. So Dan shipped me ahead to the track in North Carolina, and I had a brand new bike built with no head on it. Drove to North Carolina from Florida, and I assembled the bike that I hadn't even rode the bike. I had never even rode that bike with that motor or nothing, and that was the first time I ran Dan's motors, and Dan and I have been like really close since that year. Like me and Dan I am respectfully an amazing man that's very intelligent and runs different combinations, and by far that was probably the fastest bike I've ever ridden as far as on TT. I had bikes that bike was nasty.
We got to ride one of Dan's with were the McKibbins Missouri people? Out of Missouri?
No, McKibbins are Florida.
Florida.
So we got to ride one of Greg Casey's TRXs. I got to ride it at Mitch rode it at Black Ankle. I got to ride it at Missouri. And in the class, there was a KTM hybrid. There was a CRF hybrid. And let me tell you, that's, I'm with you. I mean, you're a motor builder. We're here to talk about you for sure, Frank.
Respectively, he builds a fast machine. And
I remember riding it.
I had some stuff that's crazy.
I was like, oh, this thing will go. I mean, I definitely like the fuel injection. Don't get me wrong, but I was like, oh my.
That was 2010, or it was 2010 that year, because that was it Harold's last year? It was 10 or 9. What year? Yeah, 10 was Harold's last year, right? Or no, 2009 was Harold's last year.
Well, yes.
Yeah, in '09, I vaguely remember Shane coming with his KTM and the 250R to Ohio.
Mhm.
And Harold's a hole shotting king. We all know that guy come out of the
Oh,
gate
yeah.
perfect.
Oh, yeah.
And that Pro-Am limited race, I pulled. We had to restart 3 times, and I pulled 3 freaking hole shots. And I walked away and won that Pro-Am race, and then I won that pro race that weekend. And that bike, I felt like I could spin out and pass everybody and beat them. That bike was that fast. But we did some weird combinations, and that thing was pushed to the edge. But that thing was so fast. And then we went to Oroville. That's where it really shined in Oroville.
Oh, yeah.
It was
Big, long
oh
straightaways. Oh, yeah.
oh. I spun out in the first corner and was like 13th or 12th in the heat race and came back and passed Harold to win the heat race. It was crazy. I mean, the bike just felt like it had nitrous. It was fast, but I mean, he was just a good person. And Casey just started running his motors, and Casey had run on some Baldwin stuff too that was really freaking fast too. And Casey switched over. The only reason why I switched over is because he broke a head cracked in the spark plug hole, and they couldn't fix it. And so we got a head, put on his bike, and Dan took care of him. And I think that his first weekend out on Dan's motor was Sioux Falls that year, and he won the Pro-Am class. That was his first Pro-Am or Pro win was that weekend. And his bikes were quick too,
Great memories, good stuff, guys, for sure.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah.
Well, hey Frank, man, I want to say thank you for your time, man. Thank you for getting on with us. So fun to reconnect and just kind of hear your story and your passion for racing. Sounds like it's just as much on fire as it was back in 2002 or 2006 when you got into it, and you're just doing it in a different capacity now. So it's super cool.
Yeah, I got a different role now. Just I'm doing what people did for me, hopefully back to other people. That's kind of the only reason I help a lot of people. I don't even want to be recognized for it when I help them. I like to help. I think it's
you
needed.
Like back in the sport that gave you so much. That's for sure.
Yeah, 100%. And giving it back to a person that needs it. And it's not for the recognition to put your name out there and pouring yourself out, but it's more just to help a person out and in need. That's more important for me than the bank account kind of stuff out of it. So
yeah, it's a good philosophy, man. Good philosophy.
All right. Well, that was Frank Batista. So, hey, man, thanks for giving us some time.
Tony, I appreciate you guys getting me on the podcast. It's awesome. I like what you guys are doing for the sport.
Hey, man, we want to give a big shout out to Frank Batista giving us some time today. Man, that was a great interview.
It was a good time.
I always love hearing about the old days and him talking about racing with Keith and Harold and Shane. After we got done recording, he said, yeah, man, I'm actually going out to have dinner with Shane and Tim Farr and a couple other guys, and I'm like, can we come? So
we got to go to Daytona to do it.
Got to go to Daytona, yeah. So it's cool to hear from him, and he's a family man now too. Got 4 kids, and one's going this way and one's going that way. So they're busy. But
it cracked me up. He was describing the last one, the 3-year-old Dax. He said the fart cart.
The fart cart, yeah. He was talking about racing go-karts and stuff. He goes, yeah, he tries to race like he's in Mario Kart or something,
throwing banana peels and stuff. It's pretty funny.
Shooting out turtle shells, but man, just good to visit with him and
hear another person that just is big connected in the racing community.
Yeah,
so he builds engines, but you kind of hear him mention all these names that he's got close relationships with, helped him along the way. Curtis Sparks, also a California native, but Daryl Rath over in Minnesota, Rich and Michelle Hetrick, PA, Charles McKibb in Florida. So you got to just make a circle around the U.S. there. And, that's this connection of community we talk within the ATV racing world. Like, your best friends can be miles and miles and miles and 48 hours away or however far.
And, like we talk about, traveling to races and stuff. And like I said, for the Midwest series, if you're here, Arkansas, Missouri, Kansas, their schedule, it's pretty decent this year.
Tennessee,
as far
Kentucky,
as
you could make all those events in single digits.
Oh, it's manageable. You know, and I can remember, back in the day where it was like, hey, like we drove to Ashtabula 2 years ago, and that's 15, 16 hours.
Yeah.
North Carolina, 14, 15, and it's like, oh boy, what a long drive. And Frank's like, 46.
Like, that's
wait, what?
2 days straight.
Like, holy cow. And then him talking about just being by himself and being his mechanic and doing everything. I'm like, if I had to drive that far, I'd just be dead to the world. Like,
absolutely.
I'm like, I'm done.
You would have to have, 4 or 5 days of recovery after you get back home, then try to work and then do it again in a couple weeks. Like, wow, the commitment. That's too cool. Well, go ahead and share some cool news, Super D.
So, along with our other sponsor mentioned, Frank with B&B Motors is jumping on. They're going to be a sponsor with us this year as well.
Sweet.
So held on to that one to the end. Yeah,
I love it.
Yeah, we've been talking to him last year. He had kind of reached out, and he does several, like we mentioned, Tevis Witt, Garrett Keister, Taylor Underwood, several people over here that race. He does motors for them as well as the NE series, and good guy. Love what he's doing. Love what he's about, and it's just so funny to hear his story. So yeah, he had actually reached out last year, and we said, hey, well, we're going into the 24 season. How about you jump on then? He said, great. So yeah, glad to have Frank Batista with B&B, and like I said, I got a little something in the garage, and so he was like, here's my address. Send me a couple of those pieces off that something, and we'll see what we can do. And I was like, okay, and don't have to tell me twice.
Are you trying to come to try beat the KTM? Is that what you're trying to do?
No, man.
We're definitely going to race them.
Well, your KTM is flat track. This is Wood's bike.
Well, that's fine. I'll get my MX bike together. Same thing.
That is true. You do have one of those somewhere.
It's, one part at JB, one at Baldwin. Just have to get it together.
Together. I like it.
Before we get too far, all right, and by too far, we're nearing the end of the episode. We keep rounding around to this theme of ATV racing and the community and the importance of relationship and people, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are the 2 greatest commands that Jesus said were the greatest 2 commands?
Well, Mitchell, the first commandment above all the other is love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And the second is like this, love your neighbor as yourself.
Yeah, so who is my neighbor?
Everybody. You're my neighbor. I'm your neighbor. You're my neighbor. Frank, our neighbor out in California, 46,000 hours away. He's our neighbor.
Neighbors.
We're all neighbors.
So first and foremost, we're supposed to love God. But second, we're supposed to emulate or repeat his love by loving our neighbors, by taking care of them, by providing for them, right?
Mm-hmm.
What else?
Well,
is there anything else?
Yeah,
Jesus says those are the 2 most important commandments. So have those 2 things, and you're going in the right direction, right?
That's right.
Have God, have a relationship with him, follow him, follow Jesus' example, and love your neighbor. And how did Jesus love his neighbor?
Man, he just did life with them.
He did life with them.
Met their needs. If someone was hurting, he tried to help them, and encouragement, set an example, and just... That's one of the things that I love about, like, I guess as I get older and reading scripture and kind of knowing now what I didn't know then. I think that's a country song. But just like when you go and look, like Jesus hung out with just like normal people, like his
not
disciples.
Normal, really. Really ragtag. Like if
even
you want to
better.
put it that way, like he was like, you people aren't the normal people. You are kind of people that are somewhat outcast. And I'm going to bring you, you outcasts, you ragtags together, and I'm going to make y'all a community.
I think Jesus would have come to the races, is what I'm trying to get at.
He would have.
He would have. And he would have been like, hey, while we're here, let's do a little moto church. And people would have been like, all right, cool, sounds good. It's just funny because there's a lot of times, being in ministry, I think that I'm like, oh, Jesus, he would be here. And I'm like, I don't know that he would. I think Jesus is pumped that we have churches and that we have service and the body comes together. Like that's a good thing.
Because he said he came to build his church, which is not necessarily a building, right? We've discussed that before.
Not knocking on the church, but I think we could do a better job about loving our neighbor that doesn't go to our church or doesn't go to church at all.
That's right.
And so
the church is not a building; it's the people that are following Christ and loving. acknowledging God first.
Yep.
Following Him
Yep.
and loving their neighbor. That's the church.
Yep.
And kind of the picture I was painting was, you know, Jesus said, "Greater love has no one than this, that they would lay their life down for their brother."
It's true.
And those were words that came out of His mouth, and that's ultimately what He did for us, right?
Yes.
Because He had to pay the penalty for us.
Yes.
So I mean, He did that. That
Yep.
was the love. Yes, He did all those things. He walked along with people. He encouraged them. He showed them a different way to live.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, He did that.
Yeah.
He fulfilled that greater, you know, that greatest love that could possibly be. He's like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm paying the price for y'all. And so, yeah, Jesus came to establish His church. He didn't come to establish a building. He came to establish His kingdom, and those are people that place their faith in Him, allow Him to be king of their lives, and He can really enable us to live life and live it to the fullest, the way that God originally designed it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
good.
Like I said, it's the older I get, the more I'm like, there's just times that before I'd be like, oh, no, we can't be part of that. But I'm like, I think Jesus would have been part of that. I think Jesus would have been like, hey, man, I'm just going to set the good example here, and I'm just going to meet people where they are, and I'm just going to love them, you know, because you know what? Jesus was all about community. And that's what we're trying to do here at Remain in the Race, is we're all trying to remain in this thing and do it as a community and encourage one another. And I love it. I'm here for it. I'm here for it all, dude.
I can't think of any better way to end it than right there, Super D. I mean, that was the great summary of what we're about here at Remain in the Race. So what a great interview with Frank.
Oh, yeah.
Good time.
Yeah.
Some good Jesus talk.
Yeah. B&B
Racing
Motors.
and Jesus. That's
'em
what
up.
we do here,
Yeah,
baby.
That's what we do.
Looking forward to the next little bit of series that we have. So we've got more
Yeah.
episodes coming up that are part of an ATV Racing Life. So next we're going to be hearing from people who do this for a living.
Ooh.
That's going to be fun.
Yeah. And connected again with maybe some of our sponsors.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pumped, man. So, man, like we said off the top, you know, thank you again. 88 Live to Ride, been with us from the beginning. RJR, welcome in Phoenix Handlebars. Get on their website, user-friendly, RITR15 to save a little bit. Get your little discount code there. 110% nutrition. Remain at checkout, save you some money there. And B&B Motors, along with our man Kevin Allen Cleveland at All Terrain Motorsports. So
yeah, baby.
The pod is growing, man, and I'm pumped about it. I love what we're doing. Great episode. Close us out, my friend.
All right, Father God, thank you for everything you've done for us. God, thank you for showing us what it means to be community, to show us how we're supposed to live this life you designed. Pray you'll forgive us of our sins, God. Help us each day to live in the way that you have designed for us. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.
Amen. That's a wrap, and we'll catch you in the next one.